Well, welcome to the Mandel Center's Nonprofit Award event. For over a decade, we've been coming together annually to celebrate nonprofit leadership and innovation. And we're pleased to have you join us today to continue that celebration. To get started, I'd like to ask you to join me in recognizing Mr. Morton Mandel, the chair and CEO of the Mandel Foundation. Through his leadership in establishing the Mandel Center for Nonprofit Organizations, Mort has inspired and motivated a generation of exceptional individuals who are using their skills to change the world. Won't you please stand, Mr. Mandel, so that our guests can join in acknowledging your many contributions. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Henry Goodman and Mr. Steve Hoffman, board members of the Mandel Foundation. Steve was last year's Leadership and Nonprofit Management Award winner. Gentlemen, would you please rise and be recognized? And I am pleased to introduce Case Western Reserve University President Barbara Snyder. Since her arrival 3 years ago, Barbara has restored Case Western Reserve to a firm financial footing, set fundraising records, and guided the faculty and staff in developing a truly innovative vision and strategic plan. President Snyder.
Thank you, Professor Colopy. It is really a pleasure to be with all of you today. I think it's a privilege to have an opportunity to celebrate people and organizations that perform at the highest levels to serve our society. For these awards, it's not enough to be among the best at what you do. It's not enough to advance a worthy cause. You have to set a standard of excellence and do so in some of our most challenging realms. Think about the people who are going to be up here later on today. Mario Tonti has spent the past 2 decades leading Beech Brook, an organization dedicated to helping children and families who face some of the most daunting mental health challenges imaginable. When you hear some of the stories of these children and what they've endured, literally your heart will break. It's almost too awful to imagine, much less to see firsthand. But people like Mario Tonti and his team, they do more than witness. They engage, they accept, they provide support and structure, compassion, and care. For those in despair, they offer hope. Every year, Beech Brook serves more than 20,000 people, relying on a broad range of philanthropic, government, insurance, and other programs for resources. As a leader, Mario Tonti has to provide a vision. He has to find a way to sustain the people who grapple daily with these challenging cases. And of course, he also has to ensure that the organization remains viable in terms of finances, operations, and the quality of services provided. It takes a unique person to manage this broad range of skills, and to do it for 20 years. This may be one instance where the phrase "patience of a saint" is not a cliche. It might be the most accurate assessment available. Then, of course, there are the people at Policy Matters Ohio. The chair, Joyce Goldstein, and executive director, Amy Hanauer. This organization began a decade ago with the mission of making Ohio more fair, prosperous, sustainable, and inclusive. That is an ambitious agenda. Policy Matters believed it could contribute to that kind of progress through the power of ideas, rigorous research, compelling communication, and some intensive advocacy work at the State House. Now, in the fall of 2010, Policy Matters is an organization that influences debate through thoughtful analysis of proposals and trends, testimony before legislative committees, and participation in public presentations on topics ranging from tax policy to the green economy. This organization has done much more than impress Ohioans. 2 years ago, the magazine The Nation called it the most valuable state or regional organization anywhere in the country. And of course, it's right here. Finally, I come to our keynote speaker for today, Robert Egger, the man who calls himself a recovering hypocrite. When you hear him speak, I think you're going to question that moniker, because I think you'll find he is one of the most candid and authentic people you will meet. Professor Colopy is going to give a full introduction, but I think it's noteworthy to say that Mr. Egger's focus is really relentless in terms of raising the bar, and that's a really important effort. It wasn't enough for him to be moved by a single night of volunteering that led him to begin the crusade that resulted in the creation of the DC Central Kitchen. It wasn't enough that he also created 2 other organizations, Fresh Start and Campus Kitchens. He also decided that he really needed to write a book, launch a national nonprofit college, and launch an effort to persuade lawmakers and his colleagues of the real economic might of organizations like his. By his lights, nonprofits should do more than just serve individuals and create better communities. They should play a real role in the electoral process. Now, this person who's been honored by multiple national organizations and recognized by Oprah herself, how can you call that a hypocrite? For years, he admired those who volunteered, but he didn't step forward. I think you more than made up for that, for that initial hesitation over the last 2 decades. And I think everybody should pay close attention to his words tonight, because he is going to play a pivotal role in the evolution of nonprofits over the next 2 decades, so we're delighted to have him here. Pragmatism, idealism, ambition, inspiration. Effective leaders and organizations have to possess all of those qualities and many more. Every year, the Mandel Center for Nonprofit Organizations celebrates exemplars in our community. And in doing so, we help celebrate what is really good about Greater Cleveland and the outstanding work that takes place right here in our community. We also provide a sense of validation and appreciation to many people who toil without great helpings of positive attention in the public arena. And finally, of course, we ourselves learn a great deal from this process. As a place that takes pride in preparing future nonprofit leaders, we need to understand both the obstacles and the achievements involved in that work. So to our award winners and to our keynote speaker, let me close by saying, first, thank you for all you contribute. Thank you for all that you teach. And most of all, thank you for living the conviction that people of goodwill and good sense can make a meaningful difference. Congratulations.
Thank you, President Snyder. To set the tone for this afternoon, we are most fortunate, as Barbara has already suggested, to have an extraordinarily innovative figure in the nonprofit leadership area, Robert Egger. Robert is the founder and president of the DC Central Kitchen, the first community kitchen in the country. In addition to serving over 20 million meals since it opened in 1989, it has helped 700 men and women gain full-time employment as a result of having developed marketable culinary skills. Robert has repeatedly been recognized as one of the 50 most influential nonprofit leaders by the Nonprofit Times, received numerous other awards, and has been acclaimed for his book on the nonprofit sector, Begging for Change. Please join me in welcoming Robert Egger.
I love hearing that stuff, but I got to tell you, it's hard to walk up here after an introduction like that. 2 of those amazing things. Thank you so very much. I hope I can live up to all this. Boy, I better work fast. I got to tell you, I am one of those people, and I'm sure you've met them, who come to your town and can't stop talking about it. Now, again, I'm pretty honest. You know, I don't really, try and bluff my way through things. I've really become enamored of this town. I've been here twice now, and particularly today. To have the ability to take what in effect was a speedy ride, but in effect an opportunity to get a real snapshot of this amazing city. and to really drive through and imagine the arc of this town as represented by the beautiful bridges. I'm fascinated by bridges. I went through that beautiful park through the middle of town, with monuments to Estonia and India and Gandhi and 1,000 other beautiful things. I had the luxury of having just a little bit of time where anybody else probably would have gone back to the hotel and sat down for a minute and rested and maybe even put on a tie. But I went to the art museum, which is a jewel. I was mesmerized by that art museum and the fact that you can walk into a museum for free and see breathtaking art. So it's a beautiful town you live in, and one that I'm honored to be here. It always makes me happy to come when we stop for a minute, and sometimes we stop from what is a relentless pace for many organizations and many leaders of sometimes just trying to make payroll, just trying to keep the lights turned on, just trying to meet the immediacy of some of the pressing issues that we all face. I look around the room and I know there's many peers. And I think for anybody who stands up in front of an audience like this to accept the award, there's always going to be a huge dose of humility when you really think about the men and women in the room and the work they do and the history of their organizations and the sweat and the toil and the passion and the huge sense of optimism they bring on a daily basis to sometimes some of the most relentless, most seemingly intransient issues that we face as a society. So I'm honored to be here. And if I could begin our conversation today with, again, a little bit of history, because I am a modest student of history. I'm mesmerized sometimes by the history and the stories you can take. And if I may, I'd like to focus a little on energy today, because Cleveland has a long history, but I'm fascinated by the evolution of energy in this town. Because if you think about it, when people first came here, and we all know this was the frontier of America. This was as far as you could go. This is where the map ended. And for people to come here and to really carve out a piece of land and to plant. And again, sometimes people of my generation, it's really hard to imagine what it meant to carve out a piece of land. And when you drive down interstates, you drive down roads and you see woods, that's what it was. And imagine what it took, you and a family, and if you were lucky, an ox, and start to pull up those trees and plow that land and plant those seeds and work hard to bring it in. The beginning of commerce, the idea that you could grow something, you could feed your family, and if you're lucky, you had surplus. And surplus led to trade, and trade led to commerce and wealth and art and towns. But if you think about this outpost, and the notion of the Erie Canal, the notion that the original mode of transportation was outdated, that it had passed the time in which the horse and the wagon could build Cleveland or this country any further, and this idea of let's build a grand canal. Let's link these rural communities through the existing rivers and waters that take advantage of our natural resources and see if we can expedite, move up, speed up the process in which we can see the fruits of our labor and build upon it. And that worked for a while, and as you all know, they put a large amount of money into building the Erie Canal, and it took about 50 years before it was antiquated, because along came the railroad. And with it, if I may be personal, a young man who had just come from Frutigen, Switzerland, was my grandfather, who settled up in Ashtabula and raised his family there. He was an engineer on the Pennsylvania Railroad. And the railroad took it a step further, and very quickly the Erie Canal and its use dissipated. And now it's almost a remnant of the bygone age that we look at with wonder, but again, it's not really part of our economic vision anymore. And the railroads took over. But at that same time, oil was discovered. And Cleveland was at the heart of a new energy boom. And again, think about this. Up until that time, oil existed everywhere in the world. But prior to the Industrial Revolution, oil was really just black, sticky stuff that came out of the ground. And it took the Industrial Revolution and men and women of Cleveland to see its potential. And with that came a brilliant new form of energy. And that just really interests me, this evolution. Now, of course, you could take it a step further and say that people like Jesse Owens in the Olympics in the 1930s expressed a different kind of energy, that human spirit that overcame racism, both here and in Germany, to display a fervent spirit that could not be held back. You could make a case that Alan Freed, another great Cleveland man, when he coined the term rock and roll, was talking about another kind of energy that for many in this room was the energy of our youth. Well, that interests me. Different generations, different ways of taking things that were right there and applying them differently and finding new energy. And that's what interests me today about the nonprofit sector. Because I look at Cleveland, and I know many of you all here, understandably, sometimes, like many American cities that had a perceived heyday, sometimes look around and think, what next for our beloved hometown? Where do we go from here? You know, we got miles of abandoned buildings. Maybe our best days are behind us. Well, if I may be so bold to suggest, I believe your best days are ahead of you. Because I believe there's gold in the streets of Cleveland, and it's being honored here today. And it has a lot to do with this glorious thing in America called charity. Deeply rooted. This is who we are as a people. Make no mistake, around the world, every religion, every faith tradition speaks to the relationship we have. The notion of there but for the grace of God go I. The notion that we're all obligated to help the other man up when they're down. But only in America has there a codified system that actually incentivizes giving through tax deductions. And again, every single year in America, average people walking down the street, and we're not talking about the government, and we're not talking about foundations. Regular people give $200 billion a year to charity. $200 billion a year. And on top of that, 90 million people volunteer in America. 90 million people. Nowhere else in the world does anything remotely come close to that. And personally, to me, that's energy. That represents the best energy of America because it speaks not only to our spirit as a people, but to an entrepreneurialism that is right below the surface. And that's what interests me, is this evolution from this glorious experiment in our civil society, our relationship to one another, and the notion that we can take it up just a notch. Now again, as was relayed in my introduction, I was on Oprah, and I was an angel, an Oprah angel. And I tried my best backstage to say to Oprah, it's like, baby, I'm grateful, thank you, but I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner who's trying real hard, but I'm not an angel. But I look around America and everywhere I go, and I'm lucky to be able to travel as much as I do. Every town I go to, I see tens of thousands of people who are working together every day to keep Cleveland going, who believe in Cleveland, who believe in Cleveland's future. Every town I go to, there's an energy there right below the surface. When I started the kitchen, it was born on a simple idea. I went out and volunteered and was saddened by the fact that the organization I volunteered with that night, while doing amazing things to make sure that people who sleep outside on the streets of our nation's capital were fed, were buying food at one of the most expensive stores in our city. And with love in their heart, going out on this occasion, a rainy night, to serve people outside. And while what we did, again, was beautiful and pure and right, it didn't solve the problem. And in fact, you could make a case that while we fed people for the night, we only set them up to come back again the next night so another volunteer could come out and serve them again. And when I thought to myself, restaurants have a significant amount of food that they throw away, but they also have jobs. And I looked at so many of the men and women, and while I still am prone at times to be a little bit too judgmental, and again, you can never judge a book by its cover, nonetheless, I looked at so many people and thought, I don't see any reason why these men and women who I'm serving every day don't have the same expectations, the same desires, the same entrepreneurial spirit, the same energy I do. Maybe all that's missing is an opportunity. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could create a situation in which we could not only feed more people better food for less money, but through job training, maybe we could actually shorten the line by the very way we served it. We're about to graduate next week our 80th class from the DC Central Kitchen. And already 10 of the 20 members who are graduating have jobs. We always pretty much get 100% employment on graduation day. But the point I want to make is that far from good deeds, far from nice, this is economically powerful. because every single one of those graduates are going to go out and collectively, the 80 men and women who will graduate from the DC Central Kitchen this year will earn $2 million. And the fact that the majority of the men and women who go through our program now are men and women who are coming home from prison, often with really stupid old drug beefs, but nonetheless records that almost preclude their ability to find work. The fact that they're able to go out and get a job and earn $2 million that they will then in turn pay in rent, in gasoline, in food, in clothing, in child care. But more importantly, and for our purposes today, they'll put $200,000 in payroll taxes into the city treasury. So rather than going back to prison and costing collectively the 40 grand it's going to cost all of us to pay, they're putting in. Now, to my mind's eye, that's the future. We've been able to open multiple businesses. In fact, last week, in the past month, we've created 30 new jobs because we get a contract with the DC school system to produce locally sourced, and that means supporting local farmers, locally sourced, cooked from scratch meals for the kids of DC public schools, which will ultimately improve their health. And if I may be just a good old-fashioned capitalist, make them productive taxpayers somewhere down the road. This is business. But the notion that we are still perceived, no matter where you go, as a charity, I think betrays that American spirit of can do. What next? Bring it on. And that's what I hope we can talk about today. Because again, there are times when people look and they look around and think, how can we possibly rebuild Cleveland? Well, I'll tell you, in my opinion, right up front, is to really recognize that the nonprofit sector in this town is A, 10% of the local economy, B, 10% of the workforce, C, full of people who are dying to make change, who will be part of anything that makes this town a better place to live, raise a family, start a business. But let's take it a step further. Case Western. Every university in the state, every university in America, 90% of the freshman class of every university has performed community service. There is a generation, the oldest person is only 25 of the millennials, men and women born between 1985 and 2000. This is a generation that has been raised almost universally doing community service, and they're coming. And they're coming in love with the idea of microcredit, social enterprise, Tom's Shoes, fair trade coffee. And they're armed with Twitter. I'm looking for my BlackBerry. Twitter, Facebook. The power of this generation is unbelievable. As an older or rapidly aging American, I don't think our generation has remotely begun to really even imagine what we're looking at. You know, sometimes we still think about the baby boomers driving the economy. This is no, they call it sometimes a baby boom. This is a full-fledged whole generation coming up, hell-bent, if I may be so bold and a little bit profane to suggest, and I hate to generalize, but what you're looking at is a generation that wants to merge spirituality, lifestyle, and income. Saying in effect, I got to get a job. I can't work for nothing, and I want to make a good living. But if I can find a job where I not only don't do harm, I actually do good, where I actually am part of rebuilding Cleveland, sign me up. And that's power. And at the same time, there's a generation, men and women my age, baby boomers. 10,000 people a day turn 60 in America. 10,000 people a day turn 60. And this is a generation, I mind you, that heard with their own ears Dr. King, John Kennedy, Barbara Jordan, Marvin Gaye. You know, men and women who I believe are looking in the mirror almost every day and wondering, is this all there is? I want to be part of something bigger again. You know, when you see them, and I don't know about you all in your nonprofits, but I see them every day by the thousands coming in saying, use me, use me. And what we're looking at, I must remind you, is the deepest well of life experience in the history of the world. This is a generation that's been the freest, richest, most educated generation ever, and they're going to live longer than any other generation before. And the notion that we don't dip into that deep well and pull out deep ladlefuls of knowledge and experience and passion and a willingness to be involved into something bigger. Now, you put those three things together, a nonprofit sector that is deeply rooted in this community, that is in every small corner every cubbyhole of Cleveland, out there working hard every single day, and you match it up with the ingenuity of a generation coming up, ready to be part of something bigger, and you merge that still with a generation that has seen things and has experience and wants to serve on boards, wants to lead nonprofits, wants to volunteer, you've got the makings of a brand new economy. You've got the makings of an army that can make this city over once again. You've got the ingenuity that made this country great, and it's right here and it's right now. You know, the groups that you are honoring today, as powerful as they are, represent only two of what is no doubt thousands of leaders and organizations that are ready to work side by side to make this city, this state, and this country a powerhouse again of ingenuity, freedom, and opportunity. What's missing, in my opinion, is the political leadership that understands what we're talking about. Too often in America, we divide our attention by the false notion that as a younger generation, in fact, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to digress for a second. I was a commencement speaker at Gettysburg College this year, and I was honored to be asked. We have a long history, and we have one of our campus kitchens located there. But it's interesting because I was going to be filmed for C-SPAN, one of a few commencement addresses that were going to be filmed. And I got a call from a couple of reporters saying, are you going to ask this generation to remind them of the power of giving back? And I said, man, anybody who asks this generation to give back doesn't have a clue about this generation. You know, my generation gave back. I built the DC Central Kitchen on giving back. You know what the kitchen's built on if you get down to brass tacks? Americans saying, I've eaten all I can eat. Take what I didn't eat and feed the poor. That's giving back. And that's not wrong, but it's never going to solve the problem. And this younger generation not only wants to solve the problem, they can't afford the solution we built. So now is the time for bravery to, in effect, be willing, as we all have parents have done with our kids, where you turn over the keys to the car and say, it's your turn to drive. And that's going to take a lot of bravery on our part. But I'll tell you, I want to go back again to the notion of our elected leaders, because all across America right now, we tell a younger generation on graduation day, again, coming out of the best university system in the history of the world, raised you in community service, we say, in effect, today, you must choose. Do you want to make money, or do you want to do good deeds? Do you want to be a .com or a .org? And it's a false choice. And God bless them, I pray they reject it. And what we need is to elect a generation of people who look at Cleveland and they see that army of young people ready to roll up their sleeves and says, if you elect me, I see you. I know what you can do. Let's work together. I want you to stay in Cleveland. Don't even think about leaving. We need you here. And I want you to get a house, and I want you to start a business, and I want you to employ people, and I want you to put money back in this town, and I'll help make that happen. But we're going to need to elect people who fundamentally understand that what we do is not charity. It is part of the economic underpinning. Because make no mistake, there is nothing non about what we do. We produce some of the best profit in America, and we need to own that. Because that art museum I went to, that's a nonprofit. All those churches I drove by, those are nonprofits. The fact that you have beautiful, beautiful parks, and that there's such a green town, that's a nonprofit. You know, all these things that make a community whole, that make faith manifest, that exemplify the human spirit, that preserve human dignity, that's what we do. And you don't want to live in a town, and you don't want to try and run a business in a town that doesn't have a vibrant, robust nonprofit sector. And all we need to take it one step further is to elect a generation of people who have a vision that includes the nonprofit sector. I've been all across this country, and you know, there's 38 governor's races, including one here in this fine state. And what I'm itching to hear is one candidate who stops and says, my vision includes nonprofits, because I understand what they produce now, and I have a vision for what they could produce in the future. I don't know how many of you all know about Muhammad Yunus. He's the founder of the Grameen Bank. But if I may use this as an example of a different way of thinking, just as you look at Cleveland with love in your hearts, he loves Bangladesh. Now, some of you all may go over to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you may remember George Harrison in 1971 had one of the first big fundraisers, the concert for Bangladesh. Since it was founded in the 70s, Bangladesh has perennially been at the very bottom of the economic ladder in the world. But Muhammad Yunus was an American-trained economist who lived in the States but loved his home country. And he was there visiting, and in a remote rural village, encountered a group of women who were lamenting the fact that they were all but indentured to moneylenders. And he asked them with, inquisitively, what would it take for you all to be free? They went over and huddled, came back, said $27. And he reached in his pocket. But if I may use this as a metaphor for what I'm talking about, he stopped. Because frankly, anybody else, myself included, would have given that $27 and gone home thinking, hallelujah, I liberated a village. And I'd be showing slides to this day. My wife would be saying, honey, get out the projector. Show them that village you liberated, Oh. But the reality is, Eunice was an economist. And he knew that what he would do in a charitable sense would be right, but it would only offer them momentary respite. That ultimately he hadn't changed the environment or the economy they were working in. While they might pay back the moneylender and have a few days off, they would ultimately have to return. And he stopped and he said, I'm not going to give you this money. But my sisters, even though in our country women have never had access to capital, I don't see any reason why the entrepreneurial spirit does not beat just as strongly in your heart as it does in any man's. So I will loan you this money. You start a business, you pay back the moneylender, you pay back me, you're free. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize for elevating 100 million people out of poverty with small loans. That's the kind of change I'm talking about. The transition, never ever letting go of the core values that we celebrate every single day in our work. The kind of ethical needle that always points true north, that is the true value of the nonprofits. But infusing it, not turning us into businesses, but infusing us with enough of the business ethos and vice versa, by the way, to really start to recognize that the future isn't .com or .org, it's something right in the middle. Now, as I suggested before, you all have an amazing history in Cleveland of seeing new ideas, of building on new forms of energy. Make no mistake, what we're talking about here is a brand new form of energy. It's a brand new form of commerce. And at times it might seem a little abstract. In fact, I'll give you an example. If any of you in this room had invested, been wise enough to invest $1,000 in Microsoft in 1986, the day it went public, you would have $500,000 in the bank today. But if you invested $1,000 in Case Western's nonprofit management school, if you had invested $1,000 in any of the award winners, any of the nonprofits in this room, or even $1,000 to the Grameen Bank, which again has elevated 100 million people out of poverty, all you were eligible for was a one-time tax deduction. Now, why not an annual tax deduction with increasing value based on the same rate of return principle as a dividend check if the organization can show measurable, verifiable impact? That's just a policy. That's just an idea. And all it takes is electing people who can see beyond the simplicity of .com, .org. I'll see you there. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Robert, for those wonderful remarks. DC Central Kitchen is an incredible story. And thanks to you for the work you do there every day. And we're delighted that you've been able to join us here today in Cleveland to help celebrate the remarkable success of our nonprofit community. And we have some pretty terrific stories here as well. Before I go on, I would like to recognize Mort Mandel, who was just recognized a minute ago, in the Mandel Foundation for the work that they do in the association with the Mandel Center. But add to that thanks the recognition that they are extraordinarily generous throughout the community. Nonprofits need support to make sure that the good work that they do in the community continues. In culture, in education, in health, in community services, Cleveland has an incredibly rich texture of organizations and institutions, and is known around the world for its leadership and the philanthropy and remarkable generosity that supports them. And here's the analogy. Just as the two organizations we recognize today represent many fine nonprofits, so does the support of the Mandel Foundation throughout the community represent the truly remarkable philanthropic spirit of our greater Cleveland community. Thank you. So let us turn now to the part of this event where the rubber meets the road, the awarding of the 2010 Mandel Center Not-for-Profit Awards. There are two. the Leadership and Nonprofit Management Award, and the Organization Innovation Award. First, I'd like to tell you for just a minute about the rather elaborate process that we've been through to arrive here. We began this process more than 6 months ago, and this year we had an outstanding committee of 18 people who do the actual work of making the selections to be honored this afternoon. The call for nominations was sent out in the early spring, and the community responded with a wonderful group of submissions. And then came the difficult part, looking closely at these excellent nominations to distinguish what really matches the criteria. There's a strictly confidential scoring system, as close to objective as we can make it. And then a subcommittee pares the list down to a smaller number, and finally, a meeting of the whole committee, the final decision session, at which, through spirited discussions, we arrive at the winners. I think it goes without saying, but I would like to say it. There are some truly excellent nominations, some of whom are in the room this evening, who could have easily won these awards. But tonight, we honored these two. And I also think it's worth noting that each of these 18 committee members is an executive director or CEO of a not-for-profit organization, some large and some small, from 6 different counties throughout Northeast Ohio. So in reviewing and ultimately in judging, these winners are selected by their peers, people who know what leadership and innovation really mean and have a wide range of experience on which to base these judgments. And a personal comment, I've been part of the selection committee for 7 years. During that time, I have reviewed with my colleagues more than 150 organizations. And I can tell you without hesitation, our community has a truly remarkable nonprofit sector. There is work done every day, day in and day out, with innovation and leadership that is breathtaking in its scope and effectiveness. I'm sure that all the committee members would agree that this is one of the most enjoyable activities that we are privileged to participate, and it is truly humbling as we read these remarkable descriptions of the amazing work being done by so many fine organizations in Northeast Ohio. So I'd like my fellow committee members in the selection group to please stand for our appreciation. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge Nicole Rothstein, Communications Specialist for the Mandel Center for Nonprofit Organizations, and the other terrific staff members of the Mandel School for their excellent support. They make a lot of copies, and they also keep track of us and keep us on track, so thank you, Nicole. On to the awards. First, Leadership in Nonprofit Management. The extensive criteria for the nomination submissions embrace the full spectrum of engagement with constituents, with community, and staff. Here's a brief look at what must be included. A record of visionary leadership that includes documented achievements. Service as a nonprofit management role model, reflecting the highest standards of ethics, individually and for the organization. Creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, as demonstrated by the candidate's ability to successfully identify and address core organizational issues, including shaping the public debate. Leadership in fostering interaction among staff, volunteers, and the community, and commitment to the principles and skills associated with good management. This really is a remarkable award, and our awardee is indeed a remarkable leader. Dr. Mario Tonti has been the president and CEO of Beech Brook since 1990, and what a superlative job he has done for 20 years. The quotes and testimonials that were included in the nomination for Dr. Tonti are truly inspirational, and there is indeed a consistent theme: providing care and programs that as much as possible respect and restore the family. Dr. Tonti has been a practicing therapist. Early in his career, he was recognized as the outstanding family therapist in Northeast Ohio. He has worked with the elderly, particularly the frail elderly. Dr. Tonti designed the first in-home family preservation program designed to stabilize families in crisis. Several years ago, he took a one-year leave to work with the Cuyahoga County Mental Health Board to launch a substance abuse mental health program and develop a system of care for children with severe emotional problems and their families, which has received national attention. During his 20-year tenure, Beech Brook has grown from an agency with a $4.5 million budget to one with a $26 million budget and a staff from 85 to 550. The range of services has increased as new programs have been developed to meet the ever-changing needs of our community. Dr. Tonti continues to survey professionals and policymakers to learn what lies ahead and how to prepare and adapt Beech Brook to meet those needs. Dr. Tonti has served on a number of boards, and he was actively involved in the successful passage of last spring's Health and Human Services Levy. He is currently helping Cuyahoga County change to its new form of government with the Health and Human Services Transition Advisory Group. One particular sentence in the nominating narrative reflects what Dr. Mario Tonti has brought to our community. As a family therapist, a teacher, an administrator, and a community leader, Dr. Tonti has kept the plight of children in the forefront and understands the vital need of programs and systems which support healthy families. Working with troubled children is a challenging arena when words such as disturbed, offender, abuse, and victim are attached to our young people. Those youngsters, their families, and the entire Cleveland community are enormously fortunate to have Dr. Mario Tonti guiding Beech Brook's efforts to nurture and heal those families. It's our high honor to present the 2010 Mandel Center Leadership in Nonprofit Management Award to Dr. Mario Tonti, President of Beech Brook. Yeah, we'll give it a minute.
I'll take my speech.
Now, mix the pages up. There we go.
Well, thank you to everybody for an honor that I never expected, that exceeds my wildest ideas about what one could get from my work. I want to say how proud I am to be chosen as the Mandel Center's Leadership Award winner this year. In reviewing the list of previous winners, I'm truly humbled to be in this company of people I have long admired and looked to for inspiration and guidance for many years. To be considered in the same category as the previous awardees is one of the highlights of my career. To stand here and look out in the audience and know so many of you and have worked with so many of you makes this moment even more special for me. The role of a good leader in a nonprofit is a tremendous responsibility, one which requires the ability to listen, learn, and grow from all the challenges we face and the opportunities that present themselves on a daily basis. My road to leadership began on Route 80 between New York City and Cleveland. There are a lot of potholes on Route 80. I arrived in Cleveland in 1976 with my wife Roberta and a nine-month-old son who's now 34, married with 2 children, to teach family systems therapy at then SAS. What I envisioned was a long career in academia. How I realized over some time that I wanted the challenge of working with larger systems. That opportunity was granted to me by Dr. Barbara Silverstone, who was then the executive director of the Benjamin Rose Institute. Barbara challenged me to take my family systems theory and apply them to the families of the frail elderly. An interesting challenge. I did not realize it at the moment, but I was expecting to both apply family systems thinking to a new population and also to run the family community service department of the Benjamin Rose Institute. I had entered the world of nonprofit management, kind of backed into it. From that experience, I moved back to working with children and families at Belfair as Director of Community Services, and then was given the opportunity to be the Executive Director of Beech Brook. There is much I could say about the 20 years that I have been at Beech Brook. We have heard some of it in terms of the growth of Beech Brook from a $4.8 million agency employing a staff of 85, serving 3,000 individuals, to today, Beech Brook's budget is $26 million and a staff of 460 people. And most importantly this year, we touched the lives of 21,000 children, youth, and families. Beyond this growth, there are 3 early events that I'd like to share with you that I feel were very important to me and to the success of the agency. The first one was the early adoption of Peter Senjay's learning organization management philosophy, which has been the bedrock of our organization's planning and problem-solving system. It was the learning organization that Deborah Rex and I chose to give our agency leadership and give the staff a common language and process to effectively address an endless array of important issues. The second was the identification of permanency as a core concept agency-wide in all the programs we developed and the treatment we provide. We asked ourselves, what was the one thing that we could do and do well that would make the most difference in the lives of children? And we recognized that all of the therapy in the world cannot heal a child who does not have a permanent, healthy living system, living family. And on the corollary, all of the problems that many of our children face are helped if they have a solid, healthy family. So we chose permanency as one of the core values of the agency. The concept of permanency became so prominent at Beech Brook that it was woven into the mission by the Board of Trustees and has generated many of our future innovations. The third factor was the board and staff's recognition that Beech Brook had to take resources and apply them to preventing children from coming to Beech Brook. We could not work day in and day out and work with kids who have been so abused and so damaged and not ask ourselves, what could we do upstream that would make a difference in the lives of the children we meet? That realization translated into a new element of our mission, which was to be a strong voice for children, youth, and families. One of the great things about living in Cleveland and working in Cleveland are the numbers of people and the organizations who are like-minded and who work day in and day out around the issue of being strong voices for children. I look around this room and there are many, many people I work with day in, day out, especially my staff, the board of directors, and so many others that I cannot name them all. Advocacy imperative took us to a deeper role in the community than we had been previously. It moved us into working in the Cleveland public schools as a way of reaching more and more children before they come to Beech Brook. It supported us working closely with the Department of Children and Family Services and improving their services with abused and neglected children. It moved us to be active in Columbus with organizations such as OACA and the Ohio Council for Behavioral Health. It moved us to work in the creation of organizations such as Voices for Ohio's Children and the Mental Health Advocacy Coalition, to just name two. It enabled, as you heard before, the board to give me a one-year sabbatical to establish Tapestry, a federal county combined $17 million grant to build a system of care for children, Cleveland's children and families. And the list can go on. I am proud of all these accomplishments and feel fortunate that I've had this time at Beech Brook, and I feel fortunate of all the people I have met and worked with. I was fortunate also that I came to Beech Brook at a simpler time, a time when resources were more available and challenges came with spaces in between them. That doesn't happen anymore. Now it's challenge, 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 challenge. We hired a great group of people and took the time to learn about how to run the agency. Today, no such luxuries exist. We know that we have challenges that are unparalleled and that it will take all of our combined experience and resources to help families arrive in a healthy place. I know the many leaders in our field, and I know that this challenge will be met as it always has been met. And I look forward to being part of the team that meets it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Your words reflect your deep commitment to your work. Before we go on, I would like to point out that beautiful vase. It's written about in your program. It's a creation of a local artist, local Cleveland artist and Cleveland Institute of Art graduate, Dan Amato. And the Mandel Center purchased that from a local gallery in Little Italy, Juma Gallery. And I think that's a wonderful reflection on the commitment of the Mandel Center to our local artist community, so thank you. And now to our next award, the Organization Innovation Award. Once again, there were many outstanding nominations, and once again, a particular submission rose clearly to the top. Policy Matters Ohio takes on the hard work of addressing the real-world stuff, developing policies and recommendations which lead to programs that help with working people's basic needs: wages, workforce training, unemployment. Again, the criteria for this award are specific and challenging. A record of innovation that includes new or reshaping of traditional products, which increases the organization's value to the community. Creating breakthroughs that withstand the test of time. Expanding beyond the traditional organizational boundaries with creativity and collaboration, and generating new ideas and fresh perspectives while anticipating and responding to future challenges. We'll talk about creating breakthroughs. In the 10 years since its founding, Policy Matters has released more than 300 reports, generated thousands of news stories, and testified in dozens of formal legislative hearings. Think tanks like to think, and Policy Matters does think. The reports are well-researched, soundly reasoned, and persuasively written. But Policy Matters has this underlying idea that good policies should be turned into practical programs. So it seeks to bridge the gap between studying an issue and policy by coupling its research with outreach, advocacy, and effective lobbying to promote change. They are, in effect, a think and do tank. Although the focus is on working families, Policy Matters is strictly nonpartisan, offering its recommendations to policymakers of either party, to business people, to educators, and to advocacy groups, and to the media. As a result, Policy Matters has the substantial satisfaction of seeing actual legislation passed into law on the federal level, legislation to support Ohio manufacturing, and within our own state, standards which increase the use of renewable energy, raise the Ohio minimum wage, payday lending reform, and improvement of the unemployment compensation system, to name just a few. With a small staff of just 9 people, but with inspired leadership, the drive of knowing your work really does make a difference, Policy Matters has made a positive impact on the lives of millions of Ohioans. Would you please join me in presenting the 2010 Mandel Center Organization Innovation Award to Policy Matters Ohio, and to chair the board, Joyce Goldstein, and Executive Director, Amy Hanauer.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you and to the committee that selected Policy Matters. As board chair, it's just a terrific privilege to be involved with this organization. I was one of the founding board members 10 years ago and became the board chair a couple years ago, and it's just so much fun. It's really great to work with the staff, with the rest of the board. I thank the original funders, some of whom are here today. And really, the work of the organization is so much because of Amy and all of the staff who are here. So thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to bring my daughter Katrina up with me because her brother once said, I once heard him in his room when he was about 2 years old. He's her older brother, and I once heard him in his room talking to his pillow or whatever, as kids do after I'd yelled at him about something. My mother might love the working people, but she doesn't care about me. And so, in fact, I do care about my kids and I care about my organization. And I'm just, it's so much fun to be up here and to look out at this crowd and to think about the fact that Joyce Goldstein and her partner Susan Grego bought tables, that the Communication Workers of America bought tables, and it's really very affirming to look out at this crowd and see some of my original funders and my incredible staff that kind of gives new meaning to collegiality and passion and commitment to their work. As a couple of people have mentioned, Policy Matters was founded about 10 years ago, and we were founded at the tail end of what was then kind of the longest, strongest expansion in recorded history by many measures. And every day when we all drive home in our cars, and some of us listen to NPR, we hear what's happened in the stock market that day. But I looked around and I looked at an economy that was supposed to be at its peak point in the late 1990s, and I felt like not everybody in Ohio was sharing in that economic growth. And I wanted to understand why that was and think about how we could create an economy that works better for everyone, that's more prosperous, that's more sustainable, that's more equitable, that's more inclusive. And so I wrote a report called The State of Working Ohio. We now replicate that report every year around Labor Day. And I brought it to some community leaders, some labor leaders, some foundation leaders, some nonprofit leaders, some academic leaders, including Joyce, including Michael Charney, who's here now, including David Burkholz, who's here now. And I said, how can we get this kind of research out into the community a little bit more? And I was met with this kind of amazing response from all of these parts of our society that, yes, we need to think about our economy and how it's working and whether it's really working for everyone or whether it's really only working for some of us. So it was a very affirming response from Cleveland, and Robert Egger is right in saying that Cleveland is a city where there's just a lot of support for new ideas and for old ideas of valuing working people. And so we've released research now, and Jim, I think, did a good job of summing up what we've done. And now we're at a moment where our economy is at a real low point, where we're emerging from a terrible recession, where I think some very excessive deference to markets led us kind of astray, where we sort of said, yes, let's deregulate things, let's reduce taxes, let's just allow markets to solve our problems for us, and where I think it led us astray, and it led us to a point where our markets weren't working very well, and neither was the rest of our society. And so I guess I feel like at this moment it's very affirming to me to receive an award on behalf of my organization and my colleagues that talks about the not-for-profit sector of the economy, because I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about the for-profit sector, thinking about how our economy is working for businesses. And that's a great thing. But I think that if we want our economy to work for working people and to work for businesses, we actually need to have a sort of more complicated economy than one that just defers to markets. We need a vibrant media. If we want markets to work well, we need people to be able to keep track of what markets are doing and to report on what markets are doing and to tell the stories and to tell where they're falling short and to tell where they're succeeding and to tell us how to move out of it. So we need a vibrant media. If we want markets to work well, we need a vibrant public sector. We need a public sector that works really well to pick up the pieces when markets fail, to regulate markets so that we feel safe buying products. And we need, of course, a vibrant nonprofit sector and a vibrant set of social movements. And so I think if we want markets to work, we need all of those things. And I guess when I look at private markets, I think what they're designed to do is to deliver profits. And that's an important thing. But we then act surprised when they sort of fail to always consistently deliver good jobs at good wages and environmental sustainability and good health and healthy communities and equity and diversity. But markets aren't designed to deliver those things. Now, sometimes they do. There are lots of great jobs out there in the private market. There are lots of great employers. There are lots of selling of products that insulate our buildings and that make us more energy efficient. And that's a great thing when those happen. But that's not what markets are designed to do. Markets are designed to deliver profits. And so if we want a society that delivers more than just profits, then we have to put in place regulation. We have to do some things beyond just deferring to markets. And so I would argue right now, and it doesn't make me happy to argue it, but I would argue right now that we have a lot of markets that are broken. We have a labor market that's not working very well, with 10% unemployment and 20% underemployment. We have a housing market that's not working very well, with lots of people who owe more than they borrowed on their homes, and lots of people who've already foreclosed. We have an energy market that's not working very well, with monthly environmental disasters, on the scale of, massive oil spills in the Gulf or mine collapses with miners trapped inside. So we have a lot of markets that are not working very well. And the not-for-profit sector, which the Mandel Center does such a good job of supporting, is there to kind of pick up the pieces, as is the public sector. And so I'm just very proud to be part of a sector that's there to pick up the pieces, that's there to tell the story, and that's there to make our society be more equitable, more sustainable, more prosperous, and more fair, more inclusive. We don't always succeed at what we do, but we try hard, and it's a great job to get up every day and get to do. So thank you all for having us and for supporting us in what we do.